Hey there, everybody. It's Catherine from Dragonfly's Quilting Design Studio. I wanted to come to you live today. I've got a bunch of bindings to do, and I thought it would be fun if we did them together. I know that binding is one of those things where it's a love-hate relationship, so I wanted to take the hate out of it and give you some more love. As you can see, we're streaming through StreamYard where we've got a webcam going. We probably will have a ticker at the moment. And there it is. All right. Hey, so if you're with us, say hi. Let me know you're here. I'm going to grab my phone because I think that's probably the only way I'll be able to see you. It's maybe a long video. I'm going to try to stream as long as we possibly can. Maybe even up to a few hours. So feel free to grab yourself a drink, grab yourself a smoke, whatever you do. Grab a binding, that's even better. Let's see here.
Catherine from Dragonfly's Quilting Design Studio.
Yay! Okay, so we have Lisa Wendell. Hey, Lisa. Susan Waters. Hi, how are you? I love it when my customers say hi, beautiful. That's so great. I know you're talking about the dragonfly, but you know, it's okay if you're talking about me too. Hey, Janet Langen. Oh my goodness, I was just thinking about you the other day. I haven't seen you in forever. So we're in the dungeon, so to speak, which is like, you know, just the basement. And so I apologize for, you know, tools and boxes and crates and things like that. But I tried to clean up as best I could for you guys. Hey, Nancy Sutton. Hey, Lisa. So again, we're going to talk about bindings, and I literally have, I think I have 6 of them here, but I'd like to at least do a few. And I'm going to go through this no steps skipped is what I like to call it, I think, hopefully, if all goes well. I actually do some web design. I design my websites. I have 3 of them, and I go through a gentleman who produces these videos, and he does these websites no steps skipped. And it can be kind of daunting because you have to sit through a lot of content to get what you need, especially if you already know like bits and pieces of it. So this could end up like that, where you say, okay, I already know how to do all that. And then so you just kind of gloss past a little bit of that and get to the place where you really want to see the content. Or you just watch the whole thing, or you have it in the background and my voice is soothing to you, hopefully, and not like nails on a chalkboard. I can't see you, but your voice talking about this is beautiful. Oh, thanks, Susan. You probably don't want to see me because I literally just threw my hair in an elastic on the top of my head, and so I probably look pretty ridiculous right now because I have this giant contraption on my neck, which is holding the webcam in place so that when I go from the sewing machine to the cutting board to the ironing station, hopefully it doesn't make you too dizzy and I don't get too wobbly. All right, so enough about all that jazz. Let's get started. I expect that people are going to jump on and jump off, and that's totally cool. If you can't watch, no problem at all. And I will try to see as many comments as I can. If you have questions, go ahead and throw them in there. I can't guarantee I'll get to them right away, but I'll do the best that I can. But one of my biggest pet peeves is bindings. I see so many beautiful quilts that have not the greatest bindings on them, and it's no fault of anybody. It's just that we don't all know how to do bindings, and we haven't all practiced and perfected the technique. And I'm not saying that that's going to happen today, but we'll get a little bit farther in our practice, hopefully. So one of the most important things, number one, and I've been seeing this a lot lately too, is pressing. Press your project first. Okay, so we're gonna say that my project is pressed because I'm not actually going to iron on my cutting mat here, but for all intents and purposes, my project here is pressed to my satisfaction. Okay, so step number one, press your project, okay? Don't iron because then you're going to distort your piecing and such, but go ahead and give it a nice press. You want to start with a pressed fairly wrinkle-free, beautiful project, okay? So that's the first step in making sure that you're gonna have like ridiculous, awesome success. Number one, a greatly pressed project. Okay. I don't know if you can hear my phone in the background. Hopefully you can't. I've got it turned down pretty low, so hopefully. Hey, Jean Berman, how are you? Okay, so step one, press your project. Step two is you're going to need a square ruler. Now you don't necessarily need one of these, which is like 20.5 inches. 12.5 one or an 8.5 one will do. 9.5, whatever size square ruler you have. Those are usually better because you can usually get a little bit more real estate on your project. If you have a bigger one, that's better. It is a slight investment financial wise because they're a little bit expensive. But the bigger the one you have, the better off your chances are with larger projects. And obviously, if you have a big one that takes the whole project, then that's even better as well. So this one, my project is going to be about 20 inches. And this one happens to be a 20-inch ruler. So it's actually going to be probably pretty perfect for what I'm doing here. But if you can imagine on my cutting table here, a king-size quilt, and then me trying to square up a corner with a little dinky 8.5-inch ruler, probably not going to be the greatest thing. Okay, so get yourself a square ruler. Whatever size that you have is good. The biggest one that you can get or you can afford is even better. And your first step is to give yourself a nice square corner. So rule number one in getting great bindings is press your project. Nice flat pressed seams is going to give you great results. Step two, 4 square corners, okay? If you don't have square corners, if they're not a perfect, what is this, 45-degree angle here, 90-degree angle, whatever it is, if they're not perfect, then your binding is not going to go on perfectly. And when you go ahead to do your mitered corner, it's not going to work as well. So that's going to give you some challenges as well. So number one, press. Number two, give yourself a nice good square. And I happen to know, because I've squared up 3 of these already. And if you'd like any of the tools that I'm using while I'm going through these, just go ahead and type it right in the comments and I'll get with you afterwards to get you these tools. So if you need a 20.5-inch ruler, please go ahead and just type in, large ruler, and I'll get with you after the show and we can work out figuring out how to get you that. This particular dragonfly is a new kit that's going to be coming out in the next few days. So you're kind of getting a sneak peek of it. If you would like one of these kits, I have it in bright, and I also have it in this jewel tone here, which you see. And I'm not sure on the price off the top of my head, but you can type in Dragonfly Kit, bright, or jewel if you're interested. I'm going to talk to you about the different things that I'm using while I'm going through the video. Not necessarily as a sales pitch, but I would be remiss, obviously, if I didn't try to sell you something. But really just because these are the tools that I use on a regular basis, so I'm going to share those with you. So don't feel like it's necessarily a sales pitch, but it is what it is. I sell things for a living, so you know how that goes, right? And I know from doing a few of these already that I want my borders on the outside of my dragonfly tips to be approximately 3 inches. So I'm just going to arbitrarily make that 3 inches. I'm going to come down a little bit farther because I know also here at the top that I want it to be roughly 3.5 inches or so. So I'm going to come down about 3.5 inches. I'm going to come over about 3 inches, and I'm going to go ahead and give myself a nice square corner cut. The other thing I'm going to pay attention to is right here. I want my dragonfly to be nice and straight as possible. So I'm going to line up one of my straight lines on the ruler right through, hopefully you can see that, the tip of his nose all the way down to his tail. And you can kind of see, I did a decent job putting these together. You can see that the angles kind of go through the similar spot here. You can see they sort of, not so quite, but go through here. And then this point right here lands right smack on the center of his tail. So I'm just kind of centering up so that when I go ahead and make my first cut, I don't have this crazy wonky first cut. Excellent. Hey, Susan Waters. Large ruler and bright dragonfly. All right, I'll let you know. I want to say they're going to be $19.99, but they might be a little bit cheaper, just so you know. Okay, so I'm going to make my first cut. I'm going to hold on to my ruler like a spider. Okay, I'm holding on like this. If I have a larger mat and more space here, because the computer's here and I would actually put part of my hand on the ruler and part of my hand on the mat, but I don't necessarily have the space. So I'm going to go really slow. I'm also going to put on my cutting glove. And it's been a thing lately where it's a hard habit to get into. If you learned how to quilt without wearing a glove, and all of a sudden somebody was like, hey, you really should wear a glove, it's a really hard habit to get into. It's like teaching an old dog new tricks. However, if you've ever sliced your finger without wearing a glove, you definitely want to invest in a glove. So I do have gloves. I offer a really, really inexpensive alternative. These are food grade cutting gloves that they use in restaurants. And I did try to slice through these with my rotary cutter several times and was not even able to get through. Obviously, my hand was not in it at the time, but I'm pretty sure it's going to protect me no matter what I'm doing here. So I went ahead and put my glove on. If you want a glove, go ahead and type in glove. They are, I believe, $6.99 each, or I think $11.99 if you want two or something like that. But if they're a little bit less, obviously I'll give you the lesser price. Like I said, this wasn't intended to be a sales pitch, but I do want to show you and make available to you the different kinds of things that I have available. So normally if you get a klutz glove, it's like $20-something, and you only get one, and it's ridiculously it's expensive, it's big, and it's bulky, and these are actually pretty nice. It's starting to fit the shape of my hand. It's got nice long fingers, so if you have long, skinny fingers, this is perfect for you. These are size medium is the size that I have. I have kind of short, fat fingers, so it's starting to stretch and fit my hand very nicely. Okay, hand on the ruler to make sure it doesn't slip. I'm going to make my first cut here. I'm going to start behind the piece, okay, not on the piece. I'm going to start behind it. My ruler is going to be right up against my rotary cutter is going to be right up against the ruler, and I'm going to start behind the piecing, and I'm going to roll forward. I want to make sure that I'm not leaning over here or leaning over here. If you're leaning like this with your ruler and you start to go, you're going to dig into I keep saying ruler instead of rotary cutter. If you're angled like this with your rotary cutter and you start to go, you're going to dig into your ruler. So not only is it going to chip your ruler, but it's also going to ding up and dull your blade really quick, and you're just going to have to throw it away. So you want to make sure that you're nice and perpendicular, I think is the right word, with the ruler, and give yourself a nice first cut. Hopefully that my ruler, and what I'm doing is here, I'm creeping up the side of my ruler. Okay, I got most of it. I was hoping that I didn't have to change my blade in advance. I'm also trying to watch the computer screen to make sure you can see what I'm doing, so I apologize. I'm trying to actually do it and also watch to make sure you can see what I'm doing. Okay, and then I'm going to go right across here, and you can see this is an opportunity here where you could probably come into contact with your hand. So you've got your hand here, and you're going across here, which they really don't recommend. You want to turn your mat. But in this particular case, I'm not going to turn this giant mat because I don't have room. But I don't want to jump off this, skip across, and cut my fingers. You know what I mean? So this is a great opportunity to have your ruler on hand. To have your glove on hand. All right, so now I have a really beautiful corner. It's going to be nice and sharp. Just the angle that I want it, because it's going to mimic that same angle that I'm going to be doing later. Whoopsie! All right, so I'm flipping this around completely all the way around. So now I'm cutting off the opposite two sides, okay? I don't generally use my cutting mat to measure. However, you can use it to kind of line things up, just to give you a kind of straight edge perspective if you'd like, but I'm definitely going to use the ruler for everything that I do. Okay, again, I know that I want approximately 3 inches here. So I'm going to come over here. Okay. I know that I want about 3.5 inches from top to bottom. So 1, 2, 3.5. And I know that I want this line right here to go straight through the center of my dragonfly. So, and that is that. Then I'm also going to double check here and here. So this is the first cut we already made. So we know that these are good cuts to lay down our ruler on. So I want my ruler to go straight down this line, straight across this line right here. And then I'm going to make the cut on that side, and I'm going to make the cut on that side. Again, I'm going to start before my piecing. And my rotary cutter is straight up and down. It's not angled like this or angled like that. Straight up and down. I'm going to go straight for it. I'm going to creep with my hand that has a glove on. Okay, I'm going to creep till I get to the top. Yeah, a little bit of a blippy there, but that's okay. And I'm going to roll right across the top here. And I'm going to creep this way. Okay, so step number 1, press really well. Step number 2, cutting, making sure your corners are perfectly square. That's very important. Sorry, that's just me putting the ruler down. Okay, I have 4 nice, perfect corners. It's going to be very helpful. Okay, remember at the beginning of the video I said this is kind of going to be no step skipped, right? So the next step is find a trash. There we go. All right, the next step is to get our binding prepared. So I chose this lovely yellow. It's got a nice little metallic tint to it. It's like a floral or something, but you can barely see it. But I think it's a nice dark yellow, almost slightly orange, which the project is missing a little bit of orange. So I think this is going to work perfectly. All right, so I'm going to pull out my yardage here, which obviously for such a small project, I don't really need a lot of yardage. Okay, the rule of thumb is to add up your sides. So in that particular case, I believe my sides were roughly 20, 20, and 18-ish. So that's 40, and then 18 and 18 is 36, so 76. Whatever your side measurements are, and then you add about 20 inches, I would say, for a large quilt. Probably maybe 10, 12 inches for a smaller quilt. You can probably get away with 10 or 12 inches. Okay, so I needed about, what did we say, 76, 86, about 90 inches roughly. So that's probably going to be 3 cuts. Okay, and we notice here I'm all wrinkled. If I wasn't on camera, I would go ahead and hack at this, no issues. But because we're on camera and we're doing a no step skipped, we're going to go ahead and press this. You're not going to necessarily get all the wrinkles out. It's just not going to happen because, you know, this has been folded up forever. But we're going to get most of them out. Most of the ones so that they don't become a problem. I'm also letting my iron warm up just a little bit because it was sitting there while we were doing that. And a fun little tip, if you're not sure about whether your iron's hot, I can't tell you how many people I have seen go like this, and I'm not actually touching it, but they go like that to see if it's hot. Well, of course it's hot, and of course you're going to burn the tip of your finger. So why not go like that and touch your ironing board? Ow. Now, see, I know that's hot, but I'm not actually touching the ironing board. So there's a lovely little tip for you in case you didn't know that. That's something my mom didn't teach me. Had to find that one out on my own. But anyway, I don't think we were big ironers in my family. Now, if you know me, you know I'm a jeans and t-shirt kind of gal, so I don't think we were ironing too much in my family. All right, so we're giving this a decent press. I know that all of the wrinkles aren't going to come out, but for example, This is pretty wrinkly down here. That's going to make a difference. So why is that going to make a difference? It's going to make a difference because when you cut your 2.5 inches, or some people might prefer a 2¼ inch binding, or even a 2-inch, whatever, or 3-inch, however big your binding is, it's going to make your measurements off. And if your measurement's off, then your binding's going to be off. And there you have it. It's very similar to the whole piecing philosophy, and when you're making a quilt, that, you know, if your pressing's off and your cutting's off and your sewing is off, your final project is going to be off. Same thing. I mean, you just apply that to every step of the way. Okay, so I'm going to take for granted, no, actually I'm not going to take for granted, I'm going to show you the right way. I was going to, you know, cheat, but I said no step skip. So I'm just going to hack off, I'm going to lob off a piece here just so that we're not working with this gigantic piece that's too much for me to handle on a webcam. And hopefully I'm not making you dizzy or sick. I'm trying to move very slowly with cautioned steps. Okay, we throw that down on the floor. Hopefully we don't need it later. Otherwise, that's going to be a funny video going to try to find it. Okay. We have a fold across the bottom here that has been machine folded when they roll the fabric off the rolls at the fabric manufacturer. They fold it as well. So here's your fold. Here's your width of fabric. Your width of fabric is always going to be selvage to selvage, how wide it is, okay? So that fold is right smack in the middle of your width of fabric. All right. Most of the time, when it doesn't matter too much, and we're not in a super, you know, if we're in a hurry or we're just going ahead and doing our business and we're not paying attention to the rules and all that jazz, we'll go ahead and just use that fold on our ruler as our guideline to get our nice straight cuts. We put our ruler right against that fold. Okay, that works for the most part. I'm a little dizzy. Sorry. That works for the most part all the time, every day, every project. Not a big deal. But if you want to really go through and do it exactly how it's supposed to be done, here's how you do it. You take your piece, you put your fingers between here and here, okay, right? So you're holding them apart from each other because you've got your finger inside, which means when you hang it, it can kind of hang the way it wants to. Now, hopefully I can reach out far enough so you can see this. You can see down there that it's kind of lumped. There's like a bump there. And as I go and I move it, it kind of straightens itself out. And as I go, you can see the bump change to the other side. So what I'm doing is I'm moving my hands left to right, trying to get this to sit perfectly at the bottom. Okay, again, if I move my hands to the left, the bump goes one way. If I move to the right, the bump goes the other way. And if I get it just right down here at the bottom, it will be perfect. All right, and that may or may not be exactly where this fold is. Definitely go ahead and give that fold a press out before you do this. That will give you the best kind of scenario when you do that technique, is if this is not pressed already. But we're going to go ahead and use it the way it is because it seemed to be fine and it's pressed, and I definitely don't want to bore you to death. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line my ruler up. See that? Line my ruler up right against the bottom edge here. Now, I don't want it to be like that. See how that is? I don't want it to be like that. I don't want it to be like that. I don't want it to be like that. I want it to be perfectly, see? Right there and right there. Perfect. Okay, and it doesn't matter if this is really fat and that's really skinny at the top. What matters is this horizontal line and your fabric, because what we did before was we tried to get it on the grain, and once it's on the grain, then you want to go ahead and do your cut. It doesn't matter what they cut before, it doesn't matter how they cut it before, it doesn't matter whether it was ripped or cut before, it doesn't matter if it's, you know, huge and then little. What matters is your fold that you created and your horizontal line on the ruler, okay? So again, giving you a nice, well, what did I do? See, I told you, it's like teaching an old dog new tricks. I'm teaching myself. Okay, so glove on. I need to adopt a thing that says, you know, like glove on. And I started before. I'm creeping up the ruler. And in this case, I have room. So I do have a few fingers on the fabric and a few fingers on the ruler because I have room. And if I put my finger right here, my middle finger, right against the ruler, and I push, I won't be able to move the ruler because my finger right there is stopping it. Okay, and then I'm creeping right up the top, and it's good. And there we go. Okay, so that's our first square up cut. Ideally, we would like to be able to turn the mat around, but again, I'm limited space here. I didn't bring my rotating mat, so I'm going to very carefully turn this around, trying not to move it. Okay. Again, we don't necessarily care about the lines on the mat. What we care about is the lines on our ruler. The reason why we don't use our mat to measure anything is because, as you can see here, it gets cut, it gets damaged, it gets bent, it gets curled. You know, some places where you're doing the same cut over and over again, you're going to create grooves in your mat and things like that. And so your measurements just aren't going to be as reliable in theory as the measurements on your ruler. So that's why they always say use your ruler to do your measuring and not your cutting mat. And it is possible to measure and cut just about anything that you need with a bunch of rulers. You don't necessarily have to have the biggest ruler, but usually one or two rulers will get you what you need. Okay, so what I've done here is I have lined up my 2.5 because I like a 2.5 inch binding. You can choose whatever you like. Okay, making sure that it's 2.5 all the way up, and my line across the top is perfectly right across that ruler line as well. Okay, and oops. So much for creeping, huh? I took the whole thing with me. Okay, again, straight up and down. I'm creeping. Okay, you put your finger right against there so it doesn't move. Oops. Oh, I definitely need a new blade. So that's it's a great thing to have on a video, actually, because it just goes to show you that when you need a new blade, you need a new blade. Go ahead and give yourself a new blade. Let's see if I have one. I probably don't because this is my secondary case here. I don't. Okay. So we're going to have to muddle through. Not because I want to, but because I have no choice at the moment. Okay, so if for some reason you find yourself in a situation where your blade is skipping, go ahead and replace it. Not because we're of a disposable generation, but because you're going to save yourself a lot of time, aggravation, energy, and you're going to get much better cuts once you go ahead and change that. If you think about it, blades and needles are like the cheapest, least expensive part of what we do every day as quilters. And blades and needles are like the two things that we never want to change, even though it's like the cheapest part of our habit. So to prevent what I did before, pulling off to the right-hand side, if you have a nick or anything like that in your blade and you have, you get a stray string or what have you, if you pull off to the side as opposed to pulling off from this side, you're going to see that there's a nick or whatever there, and you can go ahead and hack at it. Sometimes that's what we do, right? We hack at things. It's true. We all know it. Okay, so again, lining up with the 2.5 here. Doesn't matter necessarily what my salvage is because sometimes those can be kind of funny. What I really want to pay attention to is my line across the top. And whether you can see that or not, I'm pretty confident that that's pretty good. 2.5 inches, I'm creeping all the way up. And then I'm pulling away this side. Okay, I think that I'm going to get away with 3 strips. So let's see. Hey, Cindy Luke, how are you? Are you back from vacation? Sorry. All right, next step. See if I can't angle this down a little bit further. Okay. Gonna have a crook in my neck after this video is over. Oh my goodness. All right, 3 strips. Each one of them has a salvage end. 1, 2. I like to use the salvage. See how it's a different color there? It's white. When I'm rushing and not following all of the proper protocol, I use that as my straight line guide so I don't actually have to square up all my my strips, but I'm going to show you how to square them up because it's the right thing to do. Glove on, remember? That's going to be a thing, right? What is it? That comes from like a video or something? Something on? I'm sure it's not glove on. Okay, so I want to, remember we're always using our ruler. I'm going to use my ruler right across the cut that I made because I know that that's a true square cut. I'm going to get so far away that I'm not including any of the salvage. I can't necessarily see because there's not a different color there, but I can see that there's the little pock marks from the needles that keep the fabric on the machines. So I'm going to go ahead and rotary blade open, cut that. Then I'm going to come here. I'm going to do this one. I'm going to line up my line right across, and you can see how my blade, because it has a little dull spot, I don't know if you can see that, it nicked it. So I actually lost a little bit of my cutting there, and you can see those are the things that are going to create less than stellar bindings. But we're going to go ahead and see what happens. We can probably put that on the inside, hopefully, and no one will see it. Okay, and then again, this one, I'm lining right across the bottom here. Got my glove on, got my fingers half on the mat, half on the ruler. I'm starting below the piecing. My rotary cutter is right along my ruler. It's not like this. It's not like that. It's straight up and down. And I'm going to cut. Okay. Alrighty. So I don't know if you've had time to go ahead and grab yourself a binding. You probably weren't prepared for this because I didn't put it on the schedule. The reason I didn't put it on the schedule is because I never know from one moment or another if something's actually going to happen or not. So I'm going to try to angle myself here so that I am close enough with still being able to see the camera. I just need to be able to make sure that you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so here's my strip. You know that we need to fold these in half. Right, wrong sides together. They make machines for this that you can run it through and press at the same time. Those are really great. You want to go nice and slow, and you want these edges to be perfectly lined up. Okay, nice and slow. And you want these two edges to be perfectly lined up. Okay. So some people will go ahead and do that first, and then they will use that fold in order to create their miter. That's not how I do it. I generally make my miter first, so that's the way I'm going to show you. But if you're of the mindset to press first, you would go ahead and press, and then you would use your pressing line from one piece to the next. I don't use a tool for mine, so I don't need to use those pressing lines. So I'm going to show you the way I do it. There's probably 1,000 different ways to do bindings, I bet, on the planet. Okay, maybe like 100. So you basically find the way that works best for you and take what you like and leave the rest, is what I like to say about that. Because it's not for everybody. You know, one way for someone is not always the way for someone else. But I'm going to teach you the no tool method, because what I found out was that when I had a tool, what I had to do was I had to go watch a video and learn how to use the tool in order to use the tool to learn how to do what it was that I wanted to do. And I just thought that seems so silly that I have to learn how to do two things to do one rather than just doing what it is that I need to do. So I'm going to go ahead and take my friction pen. Again, that's totally up to you. Some people like to use friction pens, some people don't. They can leave lasting white marks on the outside of your quilt, so that's totally up to your judgment. This will be on the interior, and we will be, for the most part, erasing it. So I'm not concerned about using a friction pen at this step of the process at all. Okay, if you need a friction pen, I do have some of these black ones on hand. Okay, I also have this cute little 4.5 inch ruler. It's super cute, and the thing I absolutely adore about this, and I opened the package and I said, why does it have this hole inside of it? And I was like, you can't possibly fussy cut anything in that hole. It has a hole in it so that the center of your piecing doesn't cause your ruler to be bumpy. So super cute. What a really great idea. I'm surprised that I didn't think of it. Okay, so hopefully you can see. I'm going to draw a diagonal line, and what I like to do is I like to offset. Okay, so rather than putting these edge to edge, I like to offset. And remember how I said I like to use that white line here? So I cut off one side so that I have a nice square, and then I generally use the line between the selvage and the piecing. However, obviously, to get the best result, you want to cut that line off and you want to butt these up, if that's your choice. Not my choice, but that's okay. You can do it whichever way you'd like. You can certainly put these right together and draw your line. I like to offset them, and I'll tell you why. Because my aim for when I'm sewing is right here and right here. Now, if I cut both of these and then, let's see, line them up perfectly one next to the other on the edges, I can't necessarily see where I'm supposed to line up my needle, and I can't necessarily see where I'm going to end because I've covered it up. So I like to offset ever so slightly. And then you can see when I start stitching, my needle is going to be right here in the crook of this, right where they crisscross and meet. That's where I'm going to start, and I'm going to follow my line, and I'm going to end right here in the crook where these two meet here. Okay, so my ruler, I'm going to line up here where the crook starts. I'm going to line up here where the crook ends. I don't know if crook is the perfect appropriate word, but that's okay. I'm going to grab a pin. And I thought of this the other day when I was driving around, because I've been thinking of this video for a few days now. And I thought, I hate pinning. Although I do it. It's not my favorite thing to do. how will we do this? And I thought, what is the best way to pin? Normally, probably what I would have done, this is what I normally do. I would put 2 pins in, and I would put a pin here, and probably not a bent pin. You can see how I feel about my pins. And I would probably put a pin here. And then I would, stitch right between those 2 pins. Neither one of those pins will get in my way. And that's a perfectly acceptable way to pin. You could also pin across like this, and then as you roll up to your pin, pull it out, pull it out. And that's obviously a perfect way to pin. Excellent. Thanks, Diane. And I was thinking, why not use, let me get rid of these pins. Why not use my fork pins? Because ultimately, I do care about this line right here. I care about going nice and straight, hitting that line. However, if I don't hit that line just perfectly, chances are it's not going to be the biggest of deals in the grand scheme of things. However, if I don't hit this crook and this crook perfectly, that is going to be a big deal. So I thought to myself, how do you make sure that piecing won't move? And I thought, what about my trusty fork pins? And I'm giving this a try. I just thought of this the other day. I haven't had a chance to actually try it out. I'm probably going to spread my fork pins out just a little bit farther than they normally stretch. I'm going to spread those out a little bit farther just so I have room. But I thought if I place my needle in between the fork pin, and I might have to change this fork pin when I get to the machine, but we're going to give it a try. So if this is an epic failure, well, you know what, that happens in time to time. You have to try in order to, you have to fail sometimes in order to try new things to see if things are actually going to work, right? No one has ever accused me of not being willing to try something new, that's for sure. Okay, so now I have my other end here. Okay, so I'm making my entire continuous binding while we're standing here. I put 2 pieces together. You can see that I laid one across this way, and I laid one across this way, and my line goes this way. Okay, when I flip this open, you can see that my piece is going to go in a continuous straight line. If I flipped it and my piece didn't go in a continuous straight line like this, I'd know I have it wrong. So that's how you know you have it wrong. Okay, just like that. Obviously, right sides together. Sometimes it's not obvious, but you want to put your right sides together so that when you fold it open, you have 2 right sides facing you. I then take this end and I do the exact same thing. I lay it down going horizontally. Let me get this out of the way. And then I lay this one. Let's see, do we have a white? Oh, we do. I lay this one right on top of it. Okay. And so here we can't necessarily see the coloring between the 2 because it's all yellow. So I'm going to go ahead and use the edge that I actually cut. Okay. I'm going to offset ever so slightly. And the way I know that I'm offset correctly is because I used my trusty little ruler and it showed me, okay, it shows me my horizontal line going across and my line straight up and down. So that's how I know that this piece is exactly, I think, perpendicular to this piece, is because I have my line straight across here and I have it straight right here. That's how I knew earlier. All right, so remember, the most important pieces of the binding, stitching it, are this crook and this crook. And because they're offset, I know where that is. So I'm going to go ahead and trace my line From crook to crook. Crook to crook. I'm pretty sure there's probably a better term for that. Again, if you know me, words are not my talent. I prefer my actions, I guess. I don't know. All right, so again, I'm going to give my fork pins a try. I'm going to give that a try. And I'm going to see how this works. And I'm going to see if this becomes my new method of pinning. If you don't have fork pins, they're a little expensive. I know that, but they're so worth it. So go ahead and type in fork pins if you want me to hook you up with some fork pins. I will again get with you after the video for any of the items that you feel you need. A cute little 4.5-inch ruler that has the interior cut out so that your interior seam of your piecing doesn't cause your ruler to be wobbly and bumpy. So cool. All right, 3 pieces is what I needed. I've got 2 seams here. I'm going to take this to the machine. Let's see what happens here. Actually, just need to move my pile from earlier. Perfect. And then I'm sitting on my sit-upon. So if you need one of those, obviously. Let's see. The only thing I think I need is a rolly chair. I think that would make these videos much better. It would be a rolly chair because then I could roll all over the place without disrupting you too much. All right, let's see. We are at the machine. Again, I apologize. I'm trying to go slow. I'm trying to be methodical about my steps and my movements, also while trying to watch the video to make sure that you can actually see what I'm seeing. This is our first webcam video, so hurrah. Hurrah for that, you know. I've been meaning to do it for a long time, and I've had the access and the ability to do it, but those of you who follow us on Sunday nights at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time, those are clearance videos, and there's like no fuss, no muss on those videos. I don't invest a lot of time and energy in those because it's clearance, and that's what it is. I mean, there's really no expectation for it to be anything different. So, all right, remember we've got our fork pin here. So what I did was I put my fork pin, I put one on each side. I spread it out just a little. I put one on each side of that. And what I was thinking was I could set my needle down right there in the crook in between that fork pin, and I don't even have to take that pin out. So that was my thinking. My thinking was if I don't have to take that pin out, I'm not going to move anything, and therefore I'm not going to, by accident, I'm not going to accidentally not hit that crook, okay? And then I put another one down here, thinking, this is my thought, is that I can do the exact same thing here. And I spread it out just a little bit. And I can end in that crook without taking this pin out. And I'm not going to be in any danger, I don't think, of hitting the pins. When I get to the end, so I'm thinking this out here. When I get to the end, I might be in danger of rolling over this pin with my foot, but I won't be in any danger of hitting it with my needle. And I have a foot on right now that has a guide, which I don't generally use, but I'm going to leave it on because I think it will be okay. So I think we're going to get away with this, but I might have to pull this bottom pin here. Okay, so let's go ahead and give it a try. What the heck, right? Oh, in case you're wondering how I got such great light, I found this really cool light. So let's see if we can see it. So this is really cool light. So here's my light. Okay, there it is. And look what it does. It looks like a mouse, but it actually is a clamp. It's a clamp, right? So it clamps, and it's rechargeable, and you can plug it in. I have it plugged in just in case, because I didn't want it to blink out in the middle of the video. But you don't have to leave it plugged in by any means. Go ahead and use it unplugged. And here's your little button to give you your different lights. So depending on how much light you need or not. Relatively inexpensive light, very cool, very slim. I think that's part of what I liked about it, was this piece right here is very slim, ton of bright light. It's not really going to be in my way at all, and I can clip it right to my thing here, and it's like I don't even know it's there. It's so great. Love it, love it, love it. So if you need a light for your machine, I would definitely suggest this. This just happens to be one of my photograph lights that I would typically use when doing photographs, so I figured we'd give a little extra light behind the scenes over here. I'm not a professional photographer by any means, but that's what that light comes from. But in terms of for your everyday average sewing, this light right here is really cool. I just opened it out of the box just yesterday. Let's see, the box is right here. So this is my smart clip-on rechargeable lamp. Okay. And it's a 6000 K daylight, 3 brightness levels. Really great, really great. If you're interested in the light, go ahead and type in light and I'll hook you up with that. We are also probably going to have this light on sale for our ELF sale, so I will give you the pre-ELF sale special price on that lamp because we are going to have it on sale later on. All right, so we've got our light set up, we've got our pins in place, we can see the machine. I just heard a pin go. So that was that pin there that I just lost. All right, what in the heck? See all this craziness? All right, you're off camera, you can't see it. I don't know, it must have snagged on the table or something. Okay. I don't know if you've ever tried to do a video, but it's not easy. They make it look really easy on TV, and that's why people always joke, you know, the magic of TV, because they can erase and they can edit and all that jazz. But when you're doing a live video, there's no such thing as editing. There's no such thing as do-over. It just happens, and we roll with it. Right? We roll with it. Life is too short to not roll with it. Okay, so here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that I have my fork pin in place. Hopefully you can see that. It looks a little blurry, but I think it's okay. And what I'm thinking is I can go ahead and leave that in place. Even though I have my guide on my foot, I think this is going to work. So I'm going to pull up my bottom thread, just so that it's out of the way. Okay, I was going to pull up my bobbin thread. Let's try it again. Oh, there it is. Okay. I'm not going to use a leader ender right now. You can definitely use those for all your piecing. I'm just going to pull up my thread. Hopefully that'll make it better. I don't think that... I lost the bottom one, so that's okay. All right, I don't think that it's going to jam up on me, but let's... Okay. That's quite a lot of light there, huh? Let's see if we can't. There we go. All right, I think we had too much light. Is that a thing? Is there such a thing as too much light? All right, let's see what happens. I don't know. I could be crazy, but... Okay, so I'm not necessarily loving the fork pin, but let's finish it out since we're past it now. All right, so again, the most important thing, I'm gonna put my needle down, is ending right here in this little crook. Right there. Those two places are the most important. That is what's going to make sure that when you fold this open, when you fold this other piece open, they are going to actually be straight in line with each other. If you miss that crook one way or the other, they're not. and that's going to make a big difference. Again, with all quilting, follow the rules that make it necessary for you to produce the results that you want. Quilting is full of rules, different rules, you know, do it this way, do it that way, do it this way. You know, you can take what you like and leave the rest. Absolutely. So I'm just going to finger press that for a sec so we can see. Okay, see here? Perfect. It may not look it, but it is right here. Okay, if I had missed that crook, let's see if I can, if I had missed that crook, it would look like that. Okay, that does not look perfect. You can see right there. That is not a straight line. Basically, what we're trying to do is make sure that this piece and this piece become one continuous, perfectly straight line. I think the 4-inch ruler off the top of my head is, I want to say $5.99. Nancy Sutton. It's relatively inexpensive, so I can look that up. But I want to say it's $5.99. It's relatively inexpensive. Again, I didn't intend for this to be a sales pitch. That's why I didn't go and I didn't look up all of the dollar amounts and all that jazz and things like that and quantities and stuff, because it was never my intention for this to be like a sales video. But since I'm here and I'm showing you these products and I want to make sure you have the best fun stuff to work with in your stash, I figured, well, I might as well at least give you the opportunity. Okay, so here we are. We're stitched. Oops, sorry. Okay. Sorry about that. What I like to do is I like to, trying to make sure we can see on the camera and talk at the same time. I like to press it open from the back side. Did I tell you, no step skip, did I tell you to lower your stitch length? I think I did not. So my machine here automatically starts itself on a 2.2. So I don't necessarily have to lower my stitch length when I do my bindings and I press my seams open. However, my baby locks previous to this machine used to start on a 2.5, in which case I would lower my stitch length. So depending on where your stitch length starts, and if you're not sure about what these numbers mean, stitch length, as you can see, the little stitches here, they go from small to bigger to bigger to bigger to bigger. That's how you know it's the length. And this one right here is the width, because it shows you a wide bar going across this way, and that's how you know. Other times you'll see a little zigzag, and you'll see that the zigzag goes from small all the way to big. That's how you know it's your width number, is because it shows you a little pretty picture that goes from a small width to a big width. This one shows you a pretty picture that goes from a small stitch to a longer stitch. That's how you know your stitch length. Okay, so if yours starts on a 2.5 or larger, I don't know, you can go ahead and lower it to 2.2. Some people will go to a 2.0, 2.0. Totally up to you. You can give that a try and see what you like best. But because mine starts at 2.2, I don't need to lower it. However, you may. If you don't lower your stitch length, sometimes you will be able to pull these apart and you will see gaps in between your stitching. If you see gaps, then that's when you know you definitely want to lower just a little bit. Okay, note about lowering the stitch length. Sorry about that I missed that. It's kind of a take for granted because this new machine automatically starts at the stitch length I need. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to finger press this open with my finger. I'm not really stretching it out or anything like that. I'm just going ahead and pressing it. The reason why I like to do it this way, and I like to do that now, it might take an extra second to do this, but if you do it, when you go ahead and clip, which is what we're going to do next if we find our scissors, you're going to clip straight up, and then you're going to clip straight across an approximate 1/4 inch. Now you can certainly do this with your rotary cutter if you'd like, and then you're going to cut across the top, which is, these are called your dog ears. So you want to clip your first dog ear by going straight up. You're also get your threads at the same time while you're doing that, so that's nice right there. And then you want your top. And this could be anywhere from 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch, depending on what you prefer. What we're trying to do is reduce bulk, which is why we're doing it this way. So obviously you don't want to leave that in there because then you're not reducing your bulk. So to reduce your bulk, we're mitering it, and then we're also clipping our 1/4 inch. I don't think I would recommend going less than 1/4 inch, but you can just eyeball that, and it can be a generous 1/4 inch. That's totally fine. So now when you flip this open, it's already pressed apart for you. So when you go to the iron, you can just go ahead and whack that right there with the iron. If you hadn't pressed it open in advance, what you would be sitting here trying to do, either with your fingers or the iron, is get in between these two little things in order to be able to smush those apart. And it's just a little tedious. So I like to take an extra second at the beginning to go ahead and finger press that flat. So it makes it a little bit easier. And I like to do it with scissors just because I like to do things with my hands. I like to use scissors, and I feel like I just have more control. It's one less opportunity for me to hack off my fingertips. I'm just kidding. I'm really just kidding. So I don't mind doing it at the sewing machine with a pair of scissors. Certainly take it to your cutting mat and do it with your rotary cutter and your ruler. That's totally cool too. Yes, Nancy, I'm pretty sure it's roughly around $5.99, but I will get you that exact price after the video. I will start you a shopping cart. Okay, so I'm going to put this back on here. I can't say that I'm absolutely loving the whole fork pin at the start bottom, but we're going to give it a try. I'm going to try it a few times. I'm going to see if there's a way that I can. I think it's because of the foot that I have on is causing it to scrunch. But if you can see, hopefully, let's see if I can move this a little. I want my needle to start right in the crook, right where those two pieces come together. And then obviously I want to follow my line as best I can. I want my foot pedal to work. I love it. Okay. All right. So, I don't know. I'm going to pull that. All right. Well, you know what? Sometimes you have to try a few things to determine whether it works or not. So, I'm going to go ahead and pull my pin now. In theory, it worked. Is it any better or different than putting pins going this way or putting pins going that way? Not necessarily. I feel like I'm not the expert in how pins should go. I almost never tell people how to pin because I feel like it's just, I'm not an expert in it. It's a personal preference thing, I think. So I'm going to show you what it looks like if I don't finger press that open in advance. Okay? And then you can decide whether that's something you want to do. So I'm going to cut up a little to cut off my dog ear. I'm trying to cut and watch the video screen at the same time. There we go. Okay, straight across. Clipping my threads at the same time, which is really great. Because then they're not all hanging around. Clipping your threads and being neat and tidy with your piecing is definitely something that you want to practice. I used to call myself a hacker because I just went to town on everything, and as I got better and better and better, I realized the importance of all of these little all these little tips and tricks and techniques and things like that. They really just do make things better, okay? So in this particular case, I guess it wasn't too bad for me to finger press that apart. There are definitely, if I had gotten really close, because I do like a very generous seam allowance here, if I had gotten, you know, fairly close, it probably would have been a little bit more tricky. I think that this fabric is pretty pliable, and I've been working it really well. So that's, again, another totally up to you whether or not you want to hand press it open at the beginning. I like to give it a little finger press, and then that way when I bring all of these to my machine, I can just whack it with the heat, and then I'm good to go. Okay? You decide what works for you. Just because it works for me doesn't mean it works for you. Just because it works for you doesn't mean it works for the next person. You know what I mean? So it's totally up to you. I just show you and then you decide. You decide. I think that's the greatest thing about it, is that you can decide what works best for you. Okay. Let's see. I guess I had hopes and dreams about doing all 5 of these on a video, but it'll be interesting if we make it through number 1, right? Okay, let's see. Perfect. Okay. Now remember, you certainly could have pressed your binding strips in half earlier and then gone ahead and done your mitering. Totally cool if you do it that way. If you use a tool, totally cool if you do it that way as well. Just this is the way I do it. Okay. So again, that's already open, nice and finger pressed, so that when I get to the machine, I don't have to worry about going through all these little things here. I've got them all ready to go. Trying to step back far enough so you can see. I'm like tethered to all these cords. I really wish, I'm hoping my sister comes down and she can take a picture of this and you can see. I'm like tethered to cords. I have the webcam hanging from my neck. It's actually quite funny. Okay, again, like we did before, you want to press this right in half perfectly. I shouldn't say I'm grateful for quiet, because then one of the pets will come down, but I am grateful that it's at least a quiet space for me to do a video today. Hopefully you can hear me well. I didn't even ask that at the beginning because this is a webcam. I'm not entirely sure how well the volume works. It is supposed to be doing closed caption as well, and I don't necessarily see closed captioning, so it's possible that I may have not hit that switch when I did the video, but hopefully you can hear me all right. And so another key thing is to make sure that these are pressed perfectly in half. Okay, really take care to make sure that the 2 edges are right on top of one another as best you can. I would say within like a 1/16 of an inch. I mean, don't be sloppy about it at all. If you want good bindings, don't be sloppy about any of the steps. If bindings are not a significantly important thing in your life, then you know what, have at it. Not a big deal. Totally have at it. I'm not going to judge you. Maybe secretly, I don't know. Do we secretly judge each other when we see like imperfect piecing or things like that? I know it's terrible. I think we're probably our own worst critics when we see it in our own work. But if you know, having a better binding is something that you would like to strive for, then I would say you're on the right path. If you try for perfection, I'm not a perfect person by any means. Anybody who knows me will tell you that I am far, far from perfect. But when I need to, I can strive for near perfection when I need to and want to. Hopefully you can see this. And again, I'm sorry that, you know, this is part of that tedious process of no step skipped where you have to watch me iron a binding in half. But that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. Once I get through, I think, one binding, then I will probably just leave the camera on and probably not talk and just go about my business of actually doing the rest of my bindings for a little while. Okay. So here's another thing too, right here. When you did that miter, sorry, I'm just waiting for the Teflon on my ironing surface gets so hot. When you did your miter, if you didn't hit on those points perfectly, here's where you're going to struggle with that right here is when you're folding this in half and you won't be able to get a nice clean straight line because your miter was jiggy jaggy. That is an actual professional word, jiggy jaggy, just in case you weren't aware of that. Oh, goodness gracious. It normally does not take this long to do these, but obviously, like I said, I'm all tethered to these cords. I'm tethered to this webcam. I'm also trying to make sure I don't make any sudden movements because I don't want you to be dizzy. And I'm periodically looking back at the computer just to make sure you can actually see what it is that I'm seeing. For those of you who don't know me, I don't know if I introduced myself at the beginning. I apologize if I didn't. My name is Catherine, and I'm in Massachusetts, and I own Dragonfly's Quilting Design Studio. And I used to have a shop in Bellingham, Massachusetts. I had the shop for 5 years, and then we decided to close up right before Corona, about a year or so before Corona, and go online only. And we also do our videos. So we do Sunday Night Live videos every Sunday night at 7:30, almost every Sunday night. And that's how I make my living. Okay, so here's our binding. Here's that jiggy jaggy spot right there where I missed the cut. Okay, we need a piece. Here is, that's trash. Here is our piece. Okay. I think the only thing that would be better is if I had a rolly chair. And I'm sitting on my sit-upon, which tells me I can sit comfortably for hours while quilting, sewing, reading, driving, and so much more. This is not an advertisement for sit-upon. I'm not making any money for for selling that. It's not an affiliate. Just reading what the box says to stall and fill the gap of time. Okay, so here we are. In case I neglected to mention, which I think I did, this is binding by machine to the front and rolling over to the back with a hand stitch. That's how I do my bindings. This is also a straight of grain binding, not a bias binding. If you want bias binding, that's a completely different tutorial altogether, which is not this one. Okay, I'm going to roll this guy up just a little bit so he's not in my way because we've got extension cords and all this jazz over here. I'm going to find my pins. There they are. Use these guys right here just because I happen to have them on hand. I am going to find a pin. I'm going to have a drink just so you know what I'm doing. Do I have anybody with me still? That would be great. Whoops, I lost my video. Where did we go? Oh my goodness, it dumped me into a grumpy old cat. Grumpy old cat. All right, just give me a quick second. Un momento, por favor. want to find my video because I want to make sure that I can actually see you. So, Rich says, what you up to? I don't have time to answer him, unfortunately. That would be kind of rude. But Linda Hahn wants me to know if I got the text. I did not get a text. Question mark. So, okay. Okay, I'm just trying to grab our video back. I don't know, I seem to have lost it. It dumped me into some grumpy old cat video, which is kind of funny, if you think about it. Okay, here we are. Dragonfly. So, if you're looking to find us on Sunday nights, oh, what did that do? That was terrible. All right, if you were seeing these ticker that said $5 fabric, that was an old show. That is no longer, that was a special sale. It actually is $7 right now. But it's not. Scroll across the bottom. Show the ticker. There it is. Okay, there's better. I don't know when that. Oh, there's the comments. Oh, there they are. Sound is great. Thanks, Lisa Wendell. Oh, okay. See, part of the reason why I was wanting to do this video and while I was wanting to let it run for like hours on end is because I wanted to be able to fool around with things. I'm sorry that it's shaky. I wanted to be able to fool around with things and test things out as I went as well. So now I'm able to see your comments live, I think, on my computer, which means I don't have to find the video, which is excellent. Super happy about that. I see the webcam is still running, which is good. I see the ticker is correct now. I don't know how the ticker ended up changing, but if you want to join us live on Sunday nights, it's definitely a different kind of video than this. It should be a little bit more fun, I hope. You can text Quilt Party, QUILTPARTY, to the phone number 81257. And that will get you a text reminder about 15-20 minutes before we go live every Sunday night. And if you don't want to get that text reminder anymore, you simply reply stop and we will get you removed from that and you will no longer have to be reminded by us. All right. Huh. So I'm just going to play for a quick second. No. Okay. Quick sec. Just want to play with my tips, my techniques, whatever it's called here. Audio avatar, shift video up for banner, broadcasting, camera, audio, default speaker, green screen, guests, camera, perfect, general. Okay. Because this is the first time we're using a webcam and doing it with the computer, I just wanted to be able to take a minute to do things, and let's see if I can let's see what happens. Oh, there we go, and I'm able to interact with you. Excellent. Okay, good. Okay, good. All right, let's get back to it. So We talked about earlier the size, length of the binding that we need. So we need roughly all 4 edges. So there's a little bit of math. Add all 4 edges together and add about 10 inches for a small piece or 20 inches for a larger piece. And that is how many linear inches of binding you will need. So in this case, we determined that I needed about 90. I've got about 120, so I should be good to go. One thing that you may want to check out in advance, okay, 2 schools of thought. One, you can go ahead and pin your entire binding all the way around. And then you may have to adjust a little bit as you go. If it starts to create a wave, you may have to adjust your pins a little bit. Not my personal preference, but you can certainly do it that way. It's an okay, acceptable way to do it, no doubt. I don't pin as I go. I have fairly good control over what I'm doing. I may pin, a small length of it, but I don't pin the whole binding. So if you're not going to pin the whole binding, one thing you kind of do want to make sure of is that your mitered corners in your binding are not going to end up in your corners when you go to miter the actual corners themselves, because then you'll have like a double miter right on top of each other, and that's just going to cause a lot of nonsense. I will actually show you how to deal with that. I think it's a good idea that I show you how to deal with that. So I'm actually going to put a pin right here. What we want to do is we want to have a nice generous tail. So we gave ourselves 10 inches roughly. So you want to get started probably halfway down a straight line, down one of your sides, and you want to give yourself a nice long tail, roughly 10 inches or so. If you've got a bigger quilt on your machine, you can certainly go 12, 14, 16, 18, 20 inches, whatever. You can measure exact if you're an exacting kind of person, or you can kind of, give yourself just an idea, give yourself a good tail. That's all that matters. You want to have a good 10 or 12 inches of opening between where you start and where you finish, just for your own sake, so you don't have a headache on your hands. So because this piece is only about 18 inches long, that means I'm only going to stitch about 6 inches at the top and 6 inches at the bottom. So I'm going to move this all the way up here, and I'm going to get started probably about 6 inches from the bottom here. Okay, so pretty quickly we're going to come to the corner where there's going to be a miter here. But what I want to do first is I want to check to make sure that roughly, because I'm not pinning the entire binding all the way around, I want to have a rough idea that my mitered seam here is not going to land directly in my corner. Okay, and in this particular case, looking all the way around here, it's not. I'm way off, so I'm offset plenty, no big deal at all. What I will do for this case, because I want to show you what will happen if you do that, is I'm actually going to try to set it up so that I do land on a miter, because then I'm going to show you what to do. Okay, so just roughly give myself an idea of where I'm going to end up on a miter. Okay, so I'm setting myself up for failure here, but it's not really going to fail. I'm going to show you how to get yourself out of it. It's like when you back yourself into a corner when you're doing your free motion quilting. It's one of those things. So I'm going to purposely back myself into a little bit of a corner here, and then I'm going to show you how to get out of it. Okay, now how do you decide what your seam allowance should be? Well, what you in theory should do is you need one allowance that's here that you're going to stitch. You need one allowance that's going to go around, wrap around, and then you need another allowance that is going to go fold over the back. So what you need to do is you need to do a little bit of math and determine what your seam allowance should be by measuring this here. Let me see if I find my measure. in most cases, I've found on a 2.5 inch binding, it's, I believe, about 3/8 inch here. So I've got 1.25 inches, so I want to divide 1.25 inches into 3. So I believe that's about 3/8. Let's see. 3/8, 3/8, 3/8, 3/8. Yeah, close enough. Okay, so what I want here now is I want a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Now, if your binding was only a 2 inch, you want to adjust accordingly. You're going to end up with 1 inch, which means, you know, you do the math, figure it out, and then do the size that you need. Okay, so again, we need whatever size this is, divided in 3. Just looking for my pen. Oh, it's all the way on the other side. Whatever that number is, that's how big your seam allowance should be. Okay, if you don't, so that gives you the same size seam allowance on the top and on the bottom, in theory. Some people prefer a very scant seam allowance on the top. Some people prefer a larger one. Some people prefer a really large one on the back. Some people prefer a facing. So if I wanted to face this, it would be a very, very, very scant seam allowance, which I would then turn all the way around to the back, basically. And that's probably what I should be doing with this particular piece. But I decided that I don't mind that I see my seam allowance, my binding here. So I'm actually going to do a 1/4 inch seam allowance, which is why I have my guide on my foot. Check your guides because they're not always an accurate 1/4 inch. This particular one is not necessarily a perfect 1/4 inch. I found when I'm doing my piecing, I find that I literally need just the scantest little, like, 1 stitch width from the guide. So what I'm going to ultimately end up doing is probably putting a little, I've been thinking about this for a while. I'm going to probably glue a little, one of those little plastic tabs or something right to this so that I literally am just 1 hair's width away from that guide, and I think that will give me such a perfect seam allowance, and I will be super, super thrilled about that. Right now, when I add up that 1 hair's width, or, you know, it could be like a 1/16 of an inch even, when I add that up over the course of my piecing, it's too much for me for my personal taste. I want my piecing to be the perfect size. I aim for that. I strive for that. Sometimes it doesn't matter at all. Sometimes it could matter less whether or not your piecing is the right size in the grand scheme of things. But I personally strive for that. So, oops, sorry. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to use this as it is because it's about a 1/4 inch plus a hair, and that's going to be perfectly fine for me. But what it's going to do is it's going to give me a very small binding on the front and a little bit bigger of a binding on the back, and I'm totally okay with that. This actually is a sample that's probably going to travel with me and things like that eventually when we're able to leave our houses and stuff. If we ever get to go to shows again, this will go with me to shows and things like that. So I want people focused on the applique, not on the binding. But I do want a binding because I like to see a stop at the edges of my quilt. It's my personal preference. So this is not a faced binding. This is not an accurate 1/3 binding. This happens to be, I'm going to use the side of my foot and get a scant little binding, which is totally cool. It's not going to change the demonstration any, but I just wanted to make that clear to you how it's done and how I'm doing and the reason why I'm doing it and what I'm trying to strive for. Okay, so, and I found that using this guide, so if you have one of those guides that's like a super 1/4 inch, like not even a 1/4 inch at all, that is excellent because that guy is going to be super helpful when you do bindings, because the chances are it's going to give you much closer to a 3/8 or whatever it is that you need when you've done that math than you would normally get. So so I just realized this the other day that I was of the mentality that those feet are bad. Those feet are bad. They're bad. They're bad, because they don't give you an accurate 1/4 inch. But what they will do is they will give you a really beautiful binding. So just keep that thought in mind. If you have one of those big chunky feet that does not give you an accurate 1/4 inch seam, we all have one, and it has a guide on it. Just think about it in terms of maybe that will give you a nicer binding. Give it a try, practice it out, see what happens. Food for thought anyway. Okay, so I'm going to pull up my thread because that's what we always do so we don't have a little gnarly nest on the back there. My foot is off the pedal. Whenever my fingers are near the needle, my foot is nowhere on the pedal. Now my foot is on the pedal. I'm going to forward stitch and then back stitch just a little. Just like 1 or 2 stitches, no big deal. Locks it in place. And I'm going to use that guide to try to give myself a nice, even, accurate, nice line. Okay. When you're getting close to the edge, see now I told you that we were starting nice and low down on the piece because the piece isn't very big. We were going to come to our mitered corner pretty quickly. So now here I'm going to draw a line just so you can see. This is where the end of my piecing is underneath. I just want to give you a line just so you can see. You don't have to draw that line. Okay, and then here's where my seam allowance is. Remember, we said it was just a little bit bigger than a 1/4 inch. So what I need is I need a little dot right about there, which means I measured a 1/4 inch up and a 1/4 inch over. Hopefully you can see that. And I gave myself a little dot. So that's where I'm going to stop stitching roughly, and then I'm going to back stitch just ever so slightly. And so just so you can see it, this is where the edge of my, let's see, this is where the edge of my quilt is underneath. I only drew a line just so that you could see where it was. I measured up and over, and I gave myself a little dot. So you can see that dot, I'm pretty sure. If you have a purple thing, which I don't have mine handy because it's at the house, on the end of the purple thing is a little square 1/4 inch. So what you could do is you could stick the purple thing down and then make your mark. So that's a really great technique for the purple thing. All right, so I'm going to stitch to this line. Nice and slow. I have pretty decent control on my foot, and then stitch in place a couple, whatever, back stitch, whichever your machine does. I'm going to cut my threads, turn my piece, because now I'm aiming to go down in this direction. So clearly, in order for me to sew in this direction, I need to turn my piece. Okay, I've turned my piece, and now we're always aiming for our binding to be going in a straight line, and in this particular case we want it to be going in the same straight line as we are sewing. So when we were here, it was going this way, straight up and down, which is the way we were sewing. We're turning the corner now, which means we want our binding to be going this way. Well, it's not, it's going this way. So what do? Okay, so we will take our binding minus all of our cords that we're attached to. I'm really going to get a picture of this so you can see it. And we're going to fold it up so that we're going in a straight line. Okay, but we're clearly not going to stitch that, right? That doesn't make any sense. How can we stitch that? Okay. Okay. So, see? Nice straight line. Perfect there. Okay. Also, you can check your miter with your nifty little 4.5 inch ruler. Check your miter. Can barely see. straight line here, miter going across perfectly, straight line here. Doesn't necessarily have to land on any one of the ruler marks, but it's nice and straight regardless. And then you can see that it goes right across here. Okay, so that's the first part. So we want it to be going straight up and down, which is the way we're sewing. But obviously we're not going to sew on that because that just doesn't make any sense. So we want to bring it back down in the other direction, just the way we're going to go. So we're going to fold it over. I'm going to press that down right there. And then we're back in the direction of how we're sewing. See how that went? This is how we're going. We're going straight down, sewing. So now our binding is facing the right direction. And we want to just make sure that this right here, nice and straight across the top, it's not over, it's right flush with our piecing. And then what I like to do is, here's where I like to throw in a little pin. Okay, now if you are a pinner, you can pin the other side too here if you really want to. Or not. I don't know what happened to my pins. I think they keep falling on the floor. And you can pin down here. You can pin a couple places here if you want to go ahead and get you started. All right, so pull up again, my foot is nowhere near my foot pedal. I'm just using my hand crank to go ahead and bring up my bobbin thread. I'm tucking my bobbin thread underneath my foot. I'm going to go ahead and start 1, 2, couple stitches, back stitch, maybe 1 or 2. Sometimes your machine might stitch in place. That's totally cool too. I took my pin out, which means I can use my pin in another place here if I want to. Can put my pin here. The webcam is literally right in front of my face, so I have to like look around the webcam to see where I'm actually doing here. Okay, so we can give myself another pin, just if it makes you feel comfortable to just throw a few pins in there. Sometimes if you put too many pins in, you end up with what they call like a wave. See that? It's kind of like a wave. I don't know if you can see that. It's kind of starting to bubble up because I'm not using a walking foot, which means, see that? It's going to wave. If I was using a walking foot, then the top and the bottom would be walking evenly, also known as an even feed foot. So they would walk and evenly feed at the same time, which I'm not. I'm using a foot that has a flat base to it. So it's riding along and it's pushing as the bottom feet are actually grabbing. If that makes any sense, that's why that happens. Okay. So I'm just going to keep going right along. And remember, I set it up, hopefully, so that I was going to kind of back myself into a little corner because I want to show you how to get out of it. And it works on most cases. Be careful, obviously, putting your fingers too close to your piecing and your needle here. It's great to have a stiletto if you have one on hand. Adds as like an extra 5th finger for you, or 6th finger, I should say. I'd much rather run over a stiletto than I would my own finger. Alright, so I don't know if you can see here. Here's my miter. Let's see. Alright, there we go. There's my miter and there's my corner. So if I go ahead and try to miter this, I'm going to have miter on top of miter, and that's just really yucky. We definitely don't want that. So what I can do, when I realize this is happening, if you realize too late, like you're already down here, just go ahead and unpick a few stitches, no big deal. I'm going to break my thread. I'm going to stitch in place for a sec, break my thread. Okay, and I'm actually going to cut this right off. Yep, there I am. I'm going to cut my miter right off. Yikes! Oh my god, can you believe she just did that? I did, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut that miter right out. So that guy is gone. Gone, 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 gone. Okay, and now right at the machine, it's like surgery, I'm going to go ahead and make a new one. Oh my goodness. Okay, remember what we did before? We had our, and this is going to help when you get to the end too. This is pretty tight right here, so I'm going to let it go because I think I can handle it, but this might be too tight for you. This is a small space. You might have a lot of trouble with that, so you might want to back stitch, pick a few stitches, maybe another 2 inches or something like that, just to give you a little extra space. We want this to be straight down. Remember when we started, we had one piece going horizontally and then we had one piece going vertically. Right sides together. Okay, right sides together. Okay. I'm going to offset these ever so slightly, about 1/4 inch or so maybe. Okay. I'm actually going to stick a pin in just to hold them together and act as like a hand that I don't actually have here, a third hand. Okay. Want this to be as flat as possible. Got a pen. We got a ruler. Okay. So again, I'm using the lines on the ruler. Here's my horizontal line. I'm going to be in the crook here. I'm going to give myself a nice drawn line, and I'm going to end right here in the crook, right where I said. 2 most important parts. Begin in the crook up here, end in the crook here. Aim for a straight line as best you can. Perfect. Okay. And on those friction pens, just as an FYI, make sure you close them because they dry out. So don't leave it open. Okay, so here we are. See how it gets, when you don't have a lot of room, it gets a little tedious. So you might need to give yourself a little bit more and just unpick a couple stitches. All right, so we're going to go ahead and create a new miter. And it's quite possible that I didn't go back far enough, so we'll give this a try and see what happens. I might actually need to go back a little bit farther, but let's see. Okay, pull up your bobbin thread. Super important, that prevents you getting all kinds of little gnarly nests. I just want to make sure that this piece under here is nice and flat. Okay. And that piece is there. Perfect. All right, remember our crook? I'm in the crook up here. My needle is literally right in the crook. And then go ahead and give yourself a nice straight. Go nice and slow. You don't want to run over your fingers. End in your crook. Cut your thread. Okay. Another place where that kind of hand, pressing that seam open by hand comes into play. It's really good right here, especially if you're doing kind of like a lobotomy or a Frankenstein of your binding here. To have that, you can go ahead and just do that right here at your machine so you don't have to get up and go to the iron. So I'm clipping a dog here and I'm going straight across with my scissors. Just giving myself a fairly generous, grabbing my threads while I'm at it, because clipping those threads and having nice neat piecing is so wonderful. Okay, so it's nice and flat, nice and open. Then we're going to give this a nice little finger press here as well. We already had our fold, so we're just going to continue that fold right where we had it. Didn't do too bad of a job there, not too bad on the fly. Okay. See, not too bad right there. Looks fairly straight. Pretty good. All right. Start right back where we were. I'm going to start a little bit farther back than I was before. Oops. Pull up my bobbin thread. So I started just a 1/2 inch back or so, that way that my threads would overlap. All right. And then right across here. If I had on hand a little travel presser, I probably would have used that to press that out really well, but I don't have one of those with me here, so rather than getting up to the iron, and I could have done that as well, give myself a nice little dot right there at my 1/4 of an inch, and you can actually see spot on that measures a 1/4 of an inch, and here's where the piecing ended right here. So I probably could have come down just a little bit farther, but all right. See my dot? The great thing about these friction pens is they have an eraser on the end, and that eraser actually does, it's going to make a liar out of me. Some fabric, it actually does erase on fabric, which is kind of interesting. I'll probably watch this video and be like, oh, you're such a hacker. Remember, this is our first webcam video. We're normally used to just doing kind of flat out, straight out sales videos. So be kind. All right, I just backstitched a couple stitches there. And again, like I said, part of the reason why I wanted to do this video is because I want to be able to practice, and I wanted to be able to leave it running for quite a while. That way we could kind of play. And so would this be the final draft version of the video if I were teaching you bindings? No, but this is definitely our unedited, trying to go with no steps skipped and practice and get the hang of what we're doing here all at the same time. Okay, so let me get the webcam out of my way. Again, we want to be going in the same direction that we are traveling with our sewing. So we need to be going in this direction, which means we need to push our binding up in this direction to create our miter. And obviously we can't sew because that doesn't make any sense. So we need to come back down over to be going in the direction that we want to sew, again in a straight line. So this is our straight line. This is the direction that we're sewing in. We have a nice little fold right here, and we want to make sure that this fold is nice and evenly, perfectly lined up here. You can see the little line there from earlier that I drew that, so you could see that. And then we want to make sure our miter stays under there and is perfectly straight up and down. Let's see. There we go, nice and straight. You can throw a little pin in there if you need to keep it straight. Okay. Can you see? Let's see. Get rid of some of this light. It seems like there's too much light. Okay. Let's see. All right. I'm going to pull that pin out because it's going to be in the way of my... Okay, that light's off. That light is the only light. Okay. I can't remove that light because that is my actual sewing machine light. So, I know it's a little bright right there right now, but hopefully it'll pass. So, I'll pull up my bobbin thread. My foot is not on my sewing machine pedal because my fingers are underneath there. Give it a little forward stitch, give it a little back stitch, and then I'm going to go straight ahead. Again, if I were doing an even perfect binding, I would want this to be about probably 3/8 of an inch. We've got about a 1/4 of an inch here because I'm going to do a little tiny scant binding, and I'm going to roll over and make it larger on the other side. because I do want the binding to stop it, but I don't necessarily want the binding to be this huge focal point in the piece, which is why I'm opting for a small little scant binding. Again, I could have faced this if I wanted to, which meant I would have put a binding on but then not actually had anything showing. I would have used the white probably in that case, which is probably what I should have done, because this is one of those kind of pieces that lends itself really well to that kind of binding. But that's a different video. And just go a little bit at a time, nice and slowly. I mean, you don't have to go turtle's pace if you don't want to, but we don't have to actually go like a bat out of hell either. If you have a problem with speed control and you have speed control on your machine, use it. Generally there's a sweet spot where if I put my foot all the way to the pedal, I'm going to still be in control, and I have that set here on my sweet spot set. And you can practice and play with that and figure out, where your sweet spot is as well. Okay. When I was just learning and when I taught binding at the store, one of the things that I taught was for beginners that, if you can get at least 3 really good corners, I would be very happy with that. As you become more advanced, you really have to be able to get 4 fairly nice corners. And who knows? Let's see what happens, right? Generally, most days when I do a binding, I can get 4 good corners. Every once in a while, I get a dud, and you know what? That happens. Some days are better than others when it comes to sewing, for sure. I'm sure we all have those days. Okay, so I went to my little dot. Again, if you're just watching us, I drew a little line here so you could see where the quilt underneath ended. So I drew a little line. I know it's really bright because of my sewing machine light here. And then I drew a little dot 1/4 inch over and 1/4 of an inch up, right where I want to stop. I'm going to turn my piece because now I'm going to go around the corner. So I'm turning my piece, and I always want my binding to be going in the direction of my stitching direction. So that means it needs to be going straight up and down like this, and obviously it's not because it's going across like this. So we want to fold it up so that it is going in the right direction. And if you stop at that 1/4 of an inch, when you fold this, it should end miraculously right in line here, and it should give you a nice 45. Perfect. Okay. Perfect. All right. And now, obviously, if we go to sew this, that doesn't make any sense. So that leads us to be reminded that we need to flip this going in the opposite direction because we want the binding to be going in the direction that we're sewing, which is going to be straight up and down here. All right. We have our fold here. You can see that little line that I put there. We want to make sure that this is perfectly right here. We still got a nice corner here. And this lines up right on top of each other. You can see the little 1/4 inch, the miter seam under there. Okay, perfectly. Throw a little pin in that, line it up. I hope it looks like it's lined up at least on the screen because the webcam's like right in front of my face. All right, let's see. Throw a pin in there if you want. All right, and you can see underneath there, it's perfectly perfect right there. This lines up right here, perfect. This lines up right here, perfect. This lines up right here, perfect. Okay, and now we've got the binding going in the direction that we're sewing, which is what we always want to aim for. My foot is nowhere near my foot pedal because I'm using my hand wheel and I have my fingers underneath the needle. Pull up my bobbin thread, give it a couple stitches. I'm going to back stitch maybe 1 or 2 stitches, and then I'm going to go ahead and get rolling. I have my needle in the needle down position just to hopefully make it easier for the video. Let's see. I feel like that is so bright. Yeah, that's even worse. Okay, that doesn't actually look that bad. I think it looks a little less bright there. And then if you want to put a couple pins in, go ahead and do that. I like to keep my finger out of the way because I have run over it a few times. It's not fun. So I generally try to keep my finger like this. You know how like when you're cutting onions or whatever, you put your fingers on it like this so that you don't slice off the tip of your finger? Very similar, similar activity, kind of. I'm still able to use it, but I don't want it to be anywhere near. And our binding got a little bit twisted up because we had it hanging around there all willy-nilly, but that's all right. We're just gonna fix it up. And just go a little bit at a time. All right, and here's the scenario again, because remember that last time I backed myself into a corner. So now we've ended up in a second corner because of that. So let's see what happens if we faux. We're just going to pretend that we're making our miter, and let's see if that gets in our way, because it might not. It might be just far enough away. Let's see. I think we might be okay. Let's give it a try. That way we don't have to Frankenstein it again. I think we should be okay. We'll give it a try. We'll see what happens. Because I feel like the miter ends like right here at the tip. So I think we might just skirt by it. That might look kind of funny, but let's see what happens. Okay, so now we're coming to the end again here. I'll show you. Here's my little line. That's where my piecing ends, my quilt top ends underneath here. I'm going to measure 1/4 of an inch because that's where my seam allowance is. So if your seam allowance was a 3/8 inch, then you would want to use a ruler with a 3/8, and you would want to measure up 3/8 and over 3/8, not 1/4 of an inch. So whatever your seam allowance is what you want to measure, and you want to end right in that spot. Remember to collect your friction pen closed so it doesn't dry out. Okay, my fingers are out of the way. I'm going to stop fairly close to that dot, and then I'm going to back stitch 1 or 2. Break my thread. Nope. See? So let's see what happened here. I was kind of hoping. All right, let's see. Can you see the miter? Let's see what happens. Yeah, no, it's not going to work. I was hoping that we would just pass it, but we did not. All right, so we're going to Frankenstein this one more time, which is great because that gives you good practice about making your bindings on the fly here. So what does that mean? That means we need to find the seam ripper, which I don't see it here. I'm going to just clip a couple threads. Let's see. I'm just going to clip back a couple threads so that I can clip that off. And I'm going to create a new miter farther away from the corner. And remember, we did this on purpose so that we could show you how to do it on the fly. And of course, it's good practice, right? Good practice. So I've gone back about 6 or 8 inches or so, and I'm going to create a new one up here. So it doesn't really matter in your piecing where, in your binding where the miter is, as long as it's not at the corner. That's really what matters. Okay, so we're going to clip that nice and straight across the edge there. You can, again, bring this to your cutting mat and rotary cut that. If you're not able to cut a nice straight line, go ahead and cut that. I peeled it back. You can see here I've given myself, I think I'm going to give myself just a little bit more room to maneuver. The less room you have, the harder it is. So if you've ever done one like a little trivet or a little table topper type thing that's really small, and you try to do those teeny tiny little binding in the corners at the end, can really give you a run for your money there. Okay, so remember how we did this, right? We've got one coming across this way, and then we have one going this way. So we have a horizontal one, lays flat. I'm not twisting it or anything. All I'm doing is opening it and laying it flat. That's it. No twist. That's key. All right, that's how we get into trouble with these, is we twist. So no twisting. There's zero need for you to twist anything. All you're doing is laying it flat open. And then this one, I'm laying this one flat open right on top. I'm going to offset ever so slightly, and we talked about that earlier, only because I want to be able to see my little crook at the top and the bottom. Now, if I went this way by accident and then tried to open it, that would not work. Okay, so that's just a visual reminder of which way you need to go in case you can never remember which way you need to go. Just kind of pretend like the seam is there, and you'll know, okay, yes, that looks like the right way to go. If you did it this way and you folded it back this way, that would obviously not be the right way to go. Okay, so that's how you're reminded which way. And then, okay, I've got my trusty little, I love this ruler. Oh my goodness, I love this ruler. I just got these in the other day. I got them on a whim because they intrigued me. Okay. And I actually think I love it. Love it, love it, love it, love it. Okay. All right. Nice little line there that you can see. Perfect. So, what do we do? I think it goes to spool of thread. I'm using yellow thread. Obviously, if you're doing a binding that's gray, you really want to invest in the time to switch colored thread, especially if you're going to see any of the threads. You know, if you generally tend to see some of your threads when you're doing your bindings, go ahead and switch thread colors. You know, that can be kind of important. All right, I want my crook to stay there, so I'm going to just throw this right there for a sec because I want to pull up my thread. And some machines actually have a feature that, you know, you can hit the button and it will pull up the thread for you. This one might actually do that too if I just hit the up down button, but I'm so accustomed to doing it this way that that's just the way I do it. But certainly use your machine to the fullest. My old machine didn't really do that. It's funny how you learn how to do something one way and it's like kind of difficult to. Okay, I wanted to make sure I was right in that crook, and I am. And then you want to go as straight as you can right across that line, nice and slow. Don't run over your fingers. End in the crook, just where you're supposed to be. Marvelous. All right. Give yourself a nice press. Don't stretch it, just press it open with your finger. Go ahead and clip it. Again, you can take this to your iron if that helps you. Hey, Karen Waddell, how are you? Sorry I didn't see your comment come in, but hey, are we really? We're not really at 3 hours, are we? No, 3:19 p.m. Okay. I was like, what? We haven't been on here for 3 hours, have we? How are you, Karen Waddell? We miss you. So, let's see. I missed my dog ear up there. Grab that really quickly. Okay. So we got pretty close to our crook there. We just slightly out of the crook, but that's okay. Not too much. If you're within like a 16th or a scant, ever so slight, you should be good. But it's when you're like more than a 16th of an inch outside of that crook, that's when things start to get funny. Okay. Let's see. All right. And you can see right here as well, hopefully. Let's see. Sometimes you will notice if this is not straight. Let's see. How can we get this light? Yeah, it's the sewing machine light. There's not too much I can do about it. Paying attention right here as well, you know, that this is nice and straight. If it kind of bows in and out, I know this is exaggerating, but if it bows in and out, then you know you're going to have a little bit of, you're going to have tricky situation on the other side, because when you go to wrap it around the other side, it's going to be bowed, so to speak, on the other side as well. So that's not going to be good. Okay, my foot is nowhere near my foot pedal. Pull up my thread. I'm going to just slip it right underneath the back there. I'm going to start just a little bit further back from where I stopped earlier. Throw a little pin in here if that helps you. Okay. Let's see, you can see my little dog ear there, but that's okay. Turn that guy off. Perfect. Okay, we're at our last corner here. Throw a little pin in there if you want. So the whole time I'm doing this, I'm not pulling, I'm not stretching, but also the binding isn't loose. Here comes the bubber. Hi. You say hi? Hi. Oh, you lick her. There she is. Say hi. Come here. There she is. There's a pupper. Oh, did you take a nap? Okay. So we're coming up on our last corner here. So I'll draw you a little line. I'll show you where my quilt ends right there, which means I'm going to bless you. I'm going to give myself a little mark right here, 1/4 inch up, 1/4 inch over, because that's my seam allowance. If your seam allowance was 3/8 of an inch, then you would use 3/8 of an inch. Oh, we're at 2 hours on the video. Wow, this is the longest video I've ever done. I don't know, maybe not quite. Close. Okay, I think that hopefully you will catch some of this on the replay and just, you know, be able to fast forward and things like that. So we're coming right up to that little dot. I'm actually going to go right before it because I think we had a little bit of a wave going on there. All right. Okay, so we turned our piece. Remember, it needs to be going in the direction that we're going to be sewing, and we always want it to be in line with our quilt. So we fold upward so that we're in line with our quilt, but then we need to fold over and forward so that it's going in the direction of our actual sewing. So this is how we're sewing, straight down. So we fold it over. I leave my finger right there, and then I just press down. If you have little chunky fingers like I do, you might have to just pull it back a little. But what you want is you want that fold. You can see the line. You want that fold to be right across the top here. You want it to be nice and straight right here. And then you want it to overlap perfectly right here. See that? Right there. Okay, and then you can see it right underneath there. Nice and perfect. Okay, so throw a little pin in that if you want to. Okay, and then you want this to be nice and perfectly lined up going down this direction. Okay, we're almost at the magic. All right, normally it does not take me 2 hours to do a binding, or maybe it does, I don't know, I didn't time it. I'll have to time the next one. Okay, my foot is nowhere near my gas pedal. My fingers are underneath my needle. Technically, you could turn your machine off if you wanted to be perfectly safety conscious before you stick your fingers under there. I'm not sure if anybody actually does that or not, but my foot is down. I'm going to stitch 1 or 2, back stitch 1 or 2. What are you doing, baby girl? What are you doing? Okay, got my piecing is lined up perfectly here. Keeping an eye on that. Okay, I'm using my guide right here to make sure that I'm trying to get a nice straight, even seam, which is another reason why I suggest go ahead and digging out those old feet that don't give you an accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance, but have a guide on them. That's going to be really terrific. I would definitely suggest you give it a thought as to using it for your bindings. What are you doing, girl? Okay, so I've got an 8 or 10 inch span here of open space. I need to connect my 2 binding ends. So I'm going ahead and backstitch, and I'm going to stop right here so that I have enough space in between, because I don't want to be fiddling with it like we were Frankensteining the binding earlier. So, all right, so I flipped it around our last section, and again, here's our open space, 8 to 10, 12 inches or so is what you're going to need, and you need these to, you need these to overlap. So what I like to do is go ahead and overlap them like this, and then I just like to cut off the excess because I feel like there's just too much hanging around. Like, we don't need all that, and we definitely don't need all that. Right? So I'm just going to cut off a little bit of that excess. So now we have we have 2 nice manageable tails that are about 10 inches long, 10, 12 inches long. And that's what you want. You want to start and end with about 10 inches or so. And you want to have 10 or 12 inches in here as well. Okay, so what helps me remember is when we cut these 2 strips, we need to make a miter that is exactly 2.5 inches wide, because that's what the size of my binding is. So rather than using a tool, I use my binding as my tool. And so I just cut this strip off. I know it's the right size because it is the actual size of my binding. If I switch sizes and did like 2 inch, 2.5 inch, 2 1/4, things like that, this is helpful because then you have the exact size binding that you're working with that you need. So what I like to do is I like to set this down right inside the middle of the open expansion here I got. So I'm gonna lay one down. It doesn't matter which one. You can lay either one down. It doesn't matter. And then here's my open area right here. I'm gonna lay this right down on the center. Okay. And this is my guide. So what I want to do is I want to trim this piece and this piece so that they overlap this much. Okay. Can you hear the dog? What are you doing, baby? What are you doing? So how I remember where to cut is I always want to cut so that these strips are as long as they can possibly be. In order to remember that, that's how I remember it. I remember as long as it can possibly be. So if I cut it on this side, it's not as long as it possibly could be, because I could cut it on this side and it would be longer. So I want to cut these on the side that's as long as it can possibly be. So right there. Okay. Just going to set that aside for a second. I'm going to give this a nice straight cut. Again, you can bring this to your cutting mat and you can rotary cut that to be perfectly straight if you want to. I'm going to discard that little piece, and then I'm going to put this piece back down. Okay. And then I'm going to overlap this one, and again, I want to cut it so that the pieces are as long as they can possibly be. So if I cut on this side, it's not as long as it can possibly be because this side right here is longer. So I want to cut on this side, okay, because this is the longer side. So I want to cut it exactly, I can't see around the webcam, sorry. I want to cut it exactly right where this piece ends. Give myself a little trim, a little snip right there, okay? Don't snip this under piece. You can also give yourself a little pen mark right there if you want. If you don't trust yourself, go ahead and give yourself a little pen mark and then pull it away and snip it. That way you don't accidentally snip the piece underneath. I can remove this piece because this was technically my tool, and I can get rid of that. And then I'm going to go ahead and clip this. When I clip this, my secret technique is to clip it about a 1/16 of an inch smaller than I actually need it, because I don't want to end up with a wave here in the middle. If you end up with a wave here, you end up sometimes with a pleat. So I would rather cut back a scant, let's say hair or threads width or 1/16 of an inch, because you can stretch the fabric ever so slightly in order to make it fit. But if you end up with a wave, then you get a pleat. You can't fix the pleat unless you do the miter all over again, and that gets really messy. All right, so I like to cut back ever so slightly, and that is going to be about the 1/16 or even up to an 1/8 inch. All right, so we had quiet time that whole time, which was really great. 2 hours of quiet time with no humans and no animals. And now we are at the end of our quiet time, which I really can't complain about because we had it for so long. My stepdad came by and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Just trying to find a quiet place." Oh, goodness gracious. I'm just clipping these little threads because they're in the way. Okay, remember, we had the bottom piece. We're not twisting anything. We're simply opening it and laying it down flat open. No twisting, okay? Just literally pick it up, open it, lay it flat down. That's it. No twist there. See, no twist. Just flat down, okay? Just like we had before. And then this one, okay, here it is laid out flat. Okay, and we want this one to be right side together with this one. So we're not actually twisting this. What we're doing is opening it so that the wrong side is face out. This one we're laying flat and opening so the right side is face up. This one we're opening and laying down so that the wrong side is facing up, but no twists here. We're not, oops, let me see. We're not doing this and then this, see, twisting it. We're not doing this and then twisting it, okay? We're just simply laying it flat, opening it up. No twists. Laying it flat, opening it up. Okay, so one has to go horizontal and one has to go vertical. Horizontal, vertical. Okay, and then you place them right sides together. Now, this case, because we cut them just the way we needed them, we have no crook. Okay, so let's, you know, it is what it is. We could have done them all with no crook if we wanted to, but we have our last one has no crook. So we'll go ahead and stick a pin in it. Okay, we will mark where our crook would have been. Okay, and we will mark here where our crook would have been as well. Okay, just so we have a visual, just so we can physically see where we need to be. Okay, I'm going to kind of fold this up a little bit so that I can lay this out nice and flat. I want to make sure this is flat, and I want to make sure this is flat. Okay, that's going to line up with our crook right there. This is going to line up with our crook right here. It's a little tight. The smaller the project you get, the smaller the space you have to work with. So give yourself plenty of space. I usually end up giving myself less space than I should, but give yourselves plenty of space to work with. Okay. Get your pen. Okay. Going to line that up. There's my crook. There's my crook here. There's where my crook would have been. See, my piecing is lined up nice and straight here. Perfect. Okay. It would have been straight had I not had that little bump, but it is right where it's supposed to be. Okay. So, remember, we have no crook to put our needle in right there. That's okay. Just put it right on your line that you made. My foot is nowhere near the gas pedal because my fingers are underneath my needle. Okay. Here's my crook where it would have been. Go ahead and get started. You have to just readjust your hands a little bit. Hopefully I ended just where I was supposed to. Again, you can bring this to your to your ironing board if you want to, but you can finger press it right here if you want as well. Finger press that. Nice and flat. You really want that to be nice and flat, because if it's not nice and flat, that's why I try to do it with my finger, because I can feel it. If it's not nice and flat, then on this side, you're going to get like a wave. So you want all that to be nice and flat. And this has already got a fold in it right here and right here, so that should naturally just fold right where you want it to. Okay, so we finger pressed it open. We're going to go ahead, and we have no dog ear this time. All right, sorry, I have to bring it off camera because I can't see with the webcam. All right, so we're going to go ahead and clip it, just like we did the last few times. I'm going to clip off my little extra threads here. Okay, that's nice and pressed flat open. Oh, even the cat's going now. All right, so it should lay nice and flat, minus all these little extra. Okay, if you didn't cut back just a little and you feel like it's probably going to be full, meaning there's going to be a little wave or there's going to be a little extra, what I like to do is I like to put my hand here and I like to kind of give myself a little tug on the bed of the machine here just to kind of keep it stretched nice and taut. That way when I get to here, there's no wave and no extra little bump. So that's why I cut back just a little bit, because you can always stretch it just a little, but if you've got too much fabric, then there's not too much you can do about it. I'm just gonna pull up my thread. Again, my foot is nowhere near my gas pedal. Oof. Sounds like the whole house just woke up. Okay, so if I give this a little tug, you can see kind of goes nice and taut here. See how this is nice and straight? Get rid of that. This is nice and straight right here. This is nice and flat right here. There's no bump. Okay. I started just a little bit back from where I was before, maybe about 1/2 inch. So nice and straight. Okay. And then again, I've got this, I'm holding this just a little taut just to make sure that I don't end up with one of those waves. I don't think I'm going to, but if you have it, if it's a little loose, you could, and that's just a little tip. Oh, right, and here's where I started, way back at the beginning, I don't know, a half hour or so ago when we started this. And then I'll just backstitch a little and clip my threads and I'm done. Okay. Now, this is where the test comes in, right? All right, let me just clip those threads. Got all this junk. I don't like having all this junk all over the place. You know, and it gets a little raw. Clip a couple of my little threads. Okay. All right. Ready? Here goes nothing. Okay. So when we roll this over, I like to give it a little finger press here, a little finger press here. Okay. When we flip this over, this is what we call our toe catcher. So you can see that this is going in this direction, which means I can insert something like a toe now in here. So on the other side, we want that to be opposite, okay? So since this one is folded this way, we want the other one to be folded that way. So if we fold this over, we fold this down, and then so basically the exact same thing. I like to do everything. Let's see if I can get this better. Stick this under my machine. Sorry about that. Okay, so I'll use my foot to hold that in place for me. Okay. All right, so we're folded over, right? And so again, on this side, our fold goes that way. So on the other side, we want our fold to go that way. So start going this way, and then we want our last fold to go that way. And if you go this way, okay, there you are. Okay. And then there it is. Perfect. Okay. Let's check the other corners. Again, you can give it a little finger press on this side if you want to. Just kind of nice and open. Flip it over. Again, this seam is folded that way, so our last seam we want to go that way. Okay. So the first one is going this way. Okay. And then our last one, we want to go the opposite. We want it to go that way. So we just fold right over like that. Okay. So here's our front. Okay. And there's our back. Perfect. Two more. Cross your fingers. I used to have to cross my fingers. All right. Again, I can finger press this open just a little if you want to. Flip it over. There's your front. Again, the fold is that way, so our last fold we want to go that way. So we want this one first. Okay, and then we want our last fold to go that way. So this one is going to go this way. Okay, so there's our first one. And remember I said because we did this scant little binding, we were going to have less binding on the front than we do on the back. So generally you wouldn't want that. You would want the same amount on the front as you do on the back. But in this case, we were doing a little scant one. So that's why we have just a little bit here and a lot more bit there. If I wanted it to be the same on all three sides, I could have gone with like a 2-inch binding, and then it would have been little scant on here and then little scant on the back. But I really wasn't too worried about what it looked like on the back. I don't mind having a nice big binding on the back. It was the front that I wanted it to just be a little bit smaller. I like having a nice bit of binding on the back so that I have something good to grab onto when I hand stitch it. And so, let's see, there we go. There you are. Perfect. Okay. Okay. Last but not least, this is the test, right? All right, see some extra little threads we had there. Go ahead and clip those. They just get in the way. They're messy. You have to deal with them later. We don't want them. Okay. All right, so again, if you want to go ahead and finger press this open, there we go. Okay, flip it over. Want to fold this one down this way, and then we want to fold that one going that way. So see, it's going that way. So this one goes that way, means the other one goes that way. So there you go. Perfect right there. And then there you go. Perfect right there. Perfect. And that's how it's done. All right, so now I have a lot of hand stitching to do. If you want to take this to your pressing station and kind of press this open to help you fold it over to the other side, that's really wonderful. You can certainly do that. You don't have to. Some people do. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I just give it a finger press. Sometimes I don't even bother. And obviously, if you have threads, don't pull them. Clip them out of the way. All right. Again, can you finger press this? And if you have any places, you know, that kind of got all squirrely on you, go ahead and press them. Like if you're binding here, you know, didn't quite lay as flat as you anticipated, go ahead and press it. That way, when you go ahead and fold it over and do your hand stitching, you'll be good to go. Okay, so I think I have like 5 more bindings to do. So I might go ahead and put another one on the table and start a new video, I think. That way we can separate the kind of instructional portion from the actual sewing portion. So if you want to go ahead and grab yourself a binding and work on your bindings with me, that would be great. I think I'm going to start a new video for that. And I think I'm going to do a completely separate video on the hand stitching part of it because I'm just not really in a kind of space to do that kind of hand stitching right at the moment. All right, so we're going to do a separate video on the hand stitching. And oh, look at that junk. We ended up with all that junk there. I don't know what that was all about. Strange. Okay, so thank you so much for joining me. Thanks for letting me test out this binding on you. Thanks for letting me test out the webcam. Ha ha. You're a bit over 2 hours. Karen Waddell said, hey. Lisa Wendell said, I'm a bit over 2 hours. Lisa Wendell said it's been very helpful. I hope that it's been helpful. That's really great. I know that it was long and I apologize, but and then July says, is that a binding? Haha, it's like the running joke that everything's good for a binding. Right? All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. About 2.5 hours. Hopefully I didn't bore you to death and you found any little bit of it helpful, and that would make me thrilled. Okay, so we'll see you soon. Thanks so much. Let's see how we actually end this thing, huh? That's going to be the test. All right, binding over. End broadcast.